This week I have a great topic to discuss. We all know that Fast and Furious was not a documentary. In fact, while the director always said the cars were the stars, but the movie was never aimed toward the die-hard car people who build race cars or play with cars or drag race cars. That was not his audience. My role as technical advisor was to advise. So let's go through the movie and find the mistakes, the exaggerations, and a bunch of Easter eggs. So let's jump in right after this break. Did you know that the average driver gets 9 traffic tickets in their lifetime? Look, I'll be the first to admit that I've taken maybe a couple of liberties with traffic laws back in the day. And of course, when I got caught, I had to go to court to fight the ticket, which was always a hassle. And each time that I lost my case, it meant big fines, points on my record, and higher insurance premiums. Eventually, I realized that nothing beats having a good attorney argue your case in court. So here's what you do. You download the Off the Record app to your phone and register for an account. And if you get a ticket, simply upload a photo of your ticket into the app and you will be quickly matched with a lawyer in your jurisdiction. Your lawyer will start working your case right away, and in most cases, you'll never have to set foot in a courtroom. Off the Record has a 97% success rate and a 4.9 star rating on Google. And guess what? They even offer a money-back guarantee if they aren't able to reduce the points or keep that ticket fully off your record. Best of all, I've arranged a 10% discount for all of my YouTube viewers, so download the app and register using the referral code FASTLIFE to receive 10% off your first case. First scene, they're loading up a trailer full of now obsolete VCRs. If that movie was filmed today, it would probably take place in an Apple store where kids were ripping off iPhones and then take off in their Dodge Chargers. Scat packs. Well, it could be an Infiniti also. But anyway, there were 2 Easter eggs in that first scene. First, the trailer says Rogers on the side. Rogers is the last name of the stunt director, Mick Rogers. Why didn't they use a real freight company? Because we would have to pay a licensing fee for nothing. So fast forward to the hijack scene. Most people didn't know that the truck driver was supposed to be shot dead. So why instead did they use a stun gun? Here's why. At the time, I was the director of the NYRA Racing Series. NYRA was owned by the company that owned Super Street. So I persuaded Universal to work with Super Street and NYRA with us to promote the film. However, the big bosses wanted to see the script before they committed. When they read the script, they saw that street racers were going to commit a murder. They asked producers to change that scene because they didn't want street racers to be portrayed as murderers. So they edited the script and made it a stun gun instead of a shotgun. Also, during the hijacking of the truck, most people know a Honda Civic cannot drive under a trailer like that. The truck's trailer was raised about 18 inches or so the car could go under it. But on the night that they were going to film, just minutes before they started filming, my boss, David Martyr, he realized he hadn't checked the height and the clearance from the top of the roof of the Honda to the underside of the truck. So, fortunately, the stunt team had it covered. The next scene is at Dodger Stadium. Brian does a pull in his 125 horsepower, non-turbo, 420A equipped Mitsubishi Eclipse. But let's be real here for a second, okay? There's no way he would have enough power to get up to 140 miles an hour unless a rocket-powered Pontiac Fiero was pushing it. I've been in that parking lot. You can't do it. You can't even do my GTR. Next, Brian goes to Bob's Market. There, Dom's team rolls up. They started talking around the Maxima. They popped the hood and all that kind of stuff. The dialogue that they used when looking under the Maxima's hood came from a 3-page document that I wrote with general automotive terms. Obviously, general automotive phrases don't apply to all cars. But they didn't know that, and I wasn't on set that day. When I learned that they needed terms specifically for the Maxima, I suggested things like, you're not getting full boost, or you're not getting enough fuel. Maybe it's your FMU. For those of you who don't know, an FMU is basically a Band-Aid. It's basically a boost-dependent fuel pressure regulator. Next, Brian heads to his job at Racer's Edge, where he complains to Harry that his car topped out at 140 miles an hour. Okay. Again, not accurate or even plausible. And the stock transmission final drive ratio limits the car to top speed of 130 miles per hour. If you've ever ridden a 10-speed bicycle and you put it in first gear, you'll know that at some point you're not making the bike go any faster. It's the same thing with the car. And of course, so no amount of nitrous oxide will help them go past 130 miles an hour. It just doesn't work that way. Next, we go to one of the most cringy flubs in the movie, the danger to manifold. All bull. Why? Because the Eclipse doesn't have a supercharger or a turbocharger. And although he had nitrous oxide, the engine wouldn't likely blow up. And if there was a nitrous explosion in the intake manifold, it would happen within a fraction of a second and there wouldn't be a warning anywhere. There's nothing that would show unless a pressure gauge. But that's not what it said on the laptop. When I saw this written into the script, I reached out to the writers and to my bosses. I had an idea on how to make this scene accurate and fun to watch in the movie. So here's what I came up with. I suggested that they focus on the nitrous pressure gauges. The nitrous pressure gauges are attached to the bottle's nozzle. They have color-coded areas that anyone can understand. Everybody knows if a gauge goes into the red. That's not good. So as Brian is racing the car, the camera could focus on the pressure gauges as it moves into the red zone. Then the nitrous lines could split and start whipping around in the car like a runaway fire hose. When nitrous oxide discharges from the lines, it comes out at negative 125 Celsius. What would happen with that? The windshield would fog up and then would end his race without blowing up the engine. Because remember, they have to run from the cops on the next scene. It worked, but they didn't like that. They told me, I forget who told me this, I see fire and sparks here. What? From what? Did the engine blow up? I reminded them, if the engine blows up as part of that scene, how will Brian rescue Dom when he's running from the cops a few minutes later? They came back to me to help them find another option that would leave a trail of sparks or flames. Before I could even answer, they moved on to another scene. I didn't see the final result until way after the scene was filmed and after special effects team put together a CGI sequence. Instead of using my idea, they came up with something else. So they came up with this gag. One of the writers saw at a car show a guy who had diamond plate floor mats, and he thought that was the actual floorboard. What? And he figured that would just drop out of the car.
Are you stupid or something?
I always cringed when I saw diamond plate floor mats. It was stupid. I'll admit back then there were plenty of sus tuner builds, but I never saw one drop its floorboard or even a piece of it going down the road or even erasing. So it just wasn't real. There was an Easter egg in that scene. If you look under the front bumper of the Eclipse just before the floor pan comes off, you see a silver wiring harness hanging from the engine bay. What was that? That was the wires for the pyrotechnics. Somebody did a remote control to blow the floor plan. But you were not supposed to see that on camera. The race ends with Dom's RX-7 taking the other contenders to Gapplebee's, as you kids say today. And of course, the cops show up and everybody scatters. That is 100% true. Next, we move on to Brian and Dom, where they find themselves in Little Saigon in Orange County. They run into Johnny Tran and his crew. The baddies decide to torch the Eclipse. As the fire grows, Dom yells, "Nos!" Of course, nitrous oxide is not flammable, but it is an oxidizer, meaning that in real life, the bullet probably hit the cast tank and started a fire, and as the nitrous bottles got hotter, the pressure in the bottles went too high, and the nitrous vented to the atmosphere. And because there was already fire in there and you add more oxygen, the fire got bigger and bigger and bigger. So it wasn't the bottles just blowing up, it was the fire, which probably ignited the gasoline vapors, and that's why the car blew up. So not really realistic, but fun to watch. So next, Brian meets with his cop boss. The boss at one point mentions Mishimoto ZX tires. Of course, That's not a real tire company. We intentionally made up that name so as not to burn any bridges with tire companies, as we were hoping to get a tire sponsor or two. In fact, Toyo came on board and so did Yokohama. Both sponsored the movie. I had a good connection over there and they were very happy to come along with us and sponsor it, so it was great. Shortly after that, we see Brian tow in a totaled Supra over to Dom's shop. Pop the hood, right? Brian says, to Jay-Z. Jesse opens the hood and Jesse says, to Jay-Z. Jesse's line made no sense because he was supposed to be a real car guy. Of course, we look under the hood. It's not even a turbo. It's an NA car. Well, maybe that's why he said we're going to spend $15,000 to do this. And that's in those dollar days. These days, you'll be spending $80,000 to rebuild that car and more. And then after that, cue the montage. I love that montage. The camera pans down to a pile of car parts laying in the driveway. About half of those parts were not even for a Supra or even a Toyota. As a matter of fact, one of my Mustang camshafts was sitting there. That's another Easter egg. The red toolbox in the garage with the Naira sticker on it was my personal toolbox. I sold that toolbox about a year and a half ago. Paul signed it before sending it back to me, and so I sold it to a friend. And most of the trophies that you saw in the shop were from my house and other people who worked with the production. So another Easter egg can be found when Brian and Jesse are working on the computer. The pictures of the orange Supra were pictures that I took of my car while it was being built for the movie. You can see the car had different wheels and no graphics. All those, I just took pictures and they sent them over to Universal and they scanned it and it wound up in that scene. I didn't know they were going to use that for that. After that, we see Leon's GTR, Dom's RX-7, and a Ford Lightning. There's a white bumper on the top of the truck. Now they're kitting parts for they build the car. The problem was the bumper was for a Mazda Miata. What were they going to do with that? Put it on the Supra? Next, we find ourselves at the Toretto house. They're having a barbecue in the backyard. Vince walks up there and sees Brian there. He gets pissed off, hops into his Nissan Maxima, and the fun begins. This is one of my personal cars. This car had an automatic transmission. So, in order to make the car burn out, it was pretty complicated, especially when you're going backward. What you had to do, you put it in reverse, floor it, right? It goes revs, he puts it in neutral and then pushes it right into reverse. Then, he was trying to put it in drive, but it went right into first gear. And because the front tires were spinning so hard, but the transmission automatically went to low 1 gear, right? And then as the wheel speed got faster, the car thought that it now was at speed, so we can move through second and drive. And then you can hear the shifts. It's all done by the computer. First time I saw that scene and heard what was going on, I thought my transmission was going to die after the movie. Because the wheel speed was now very slow, the car bogged down, so the stunt driver put the foot to the floor again and it shifted back down into first. It was a mess. Anyway, Vince comes back and rejoins the barbecue. There's a little trivia bit, maybe not an Easter egg, but something not many people know about. When Jesse is asked to say grace, he recites something else. It goes like this. Dear Heavenly Spirit, thank you for providing us direct port nitrous injection, 4-core intercoolers, ball bearing turbos, and titanium valve springs. Now, where did they come up with that? I got a call, I think it was from Rob Cohen or from Chris Morgan, one of the screenwriters. We need a car prayer. What are you talking about? You're saying grace, you have to pray to something, but it's not got to be spiritual or religious. What can you do? I was actually at dinner. I wrote on a napkin. When I got home, I emailed them at 11 o'clock at night, and I didn't know they were going to use that until I saw the movie, so that was kind of cool. And then shortly after that, Hector rolls into Racer's Edge, where Hector gives Brian a list of eBay Ricey parts, including a turbo whistle. Where is he building his car? In Oakland? So if Hector wants to buy Ricey parts off eBay, why did he go to a serious performance shop? Makes no sense. I just can't keep up with the nonsense. Next, we see Brian scoping out Hector's garage. He gets caught by Vince and Dom. Then Brian starts talking about the specs of the 3 Hectors Hondas with spoon engines, with T66 turbos. It actually said T06, but they said T66, with NOS and a Motec system exhaust. When I first heard that, I cringed. How could that happen? The first time we saw that, we were sitting in a test screening for all the car people who rented their cars to the production. And Rob was sitting 2 seats behind me, and we all talked, it was like 15 of us, and what the did he just say? Rob sensed that we were talking about something, and he tapped me on my shoulder and said, what's all that about? Rob, there's no such thing. Where did that come from? I learned later that Paul Walker just ad-libbed it. So I couldn't be on set at night. I gave them the list of generic car terms that were applicable to tuner cars. But they started mixing and match like it was living room furniture, and it didn't work out very well. And Paul at the time didn't know much about tuner cars, and so he just ad-libbed the Motec system exhaust. What I had written was Motec ECUs, so I don't know where it came up with the system exhaust, but whatever. As a matter of fact, in 2015, Motec considered making an exhaust. Swear to God, I can prove it. Next, we roll into Race Wars. Lots of continuity errors in this part of the movie. Within a few seconds, we see Letty working her way through the staging lanes in her 240 SX when she meets Reggae Racer, the guy in the white Mazda RX-7. And if you look closely, when she gets up to the starting line, her 240 SX has racing seats, and just before she launches the car, she now has stock seats. That's because she was first in the hero car, and then just before the race, she got into the stunt car, and then she did not do the drag race at all. Next, we see Brian and Jesse walking toward the start staging lines. Then the camera pans to Johnny Tran as he rolls down his window to reveal his red leather seats. Remember that. He's still sitting at the starting line. The camera moves back to Jesse's interior. Take notes of the Sparco racing seats that you see right now, and then the harnesses and the rear back door window. You could see it's a 4-door car, right? Now, the camera focuses on Johnny's face. Remember the S2000 is a 2-door convertible? Freeze the movie and look 3 inches up from his hand on the steering wheel, and now you see a rear quarter window like in a Honda Civic 2-door. That's because Johnny Tran was sitting in a Honda Civic McRig car. We used red seat covers to cover the headrest. That's how we did it. He wasn't even an S2000. Next, the camera goes on Jesse's face as soon as he hits the nitrous. If you freeze that frame, you'll see through the rear window, the back windshield, and you'll see a black double-decker wing on the trunk, and you can see the rear quarter window of a 2-door Civic. Why? Because Jesse, Chad Lindberg, was in a Honda Civic McRig, made to look like the Jetta on the inside. You can see that. I have a couple of pictures here. We put a white decal on the door in case the camera sees any part of the door, and that's how they did it. And so as we get to the climax of the movie, Brian and Mia take off into the desert to stop Dom and the crew from hijacking another truck. If you look closely at the black Honda Civic, when it flips, you can see a very elaborate roll cage in the car. And that's because it's a stunt car. And if you look at the Toyota badge on the back of the Supra, you would see an upside down logo. Why was that done? That wasn't a mistake. One of the picture cars I worked with did that as an Easter egg. They do that kind of stuff all the time. Next, Jesse gets shot and Brian chases the bad guys as they come down the hill. Tran and his cousin were shooting at Brian, but they miss, and the gunfire hits a bunch of parked cars on the left side of the street. And if you watch that sequence, you can see that they shoot up the same cars 2 or 3 times in the same scene. Brian finally catches up to Dom, and they agree to race, and that's the climax. When Dom's engine threw a rod through the block during the race, Dom's car would sputter and catch on fire, but that didn't happen. Anyway, we have to remember that this movie is not a documentary. I had the luxury of seeing several rough cuts in the months after the production wrapped up, and whenever I brought up an error on dialogue, Rob would remind me that this movie was not aimed at actual drag racers or street racers. It turns out he was right. That movie touched a nerve with every teen driver and soon-to-be driver. What Rob Cohen, Neil Moritz, and Doug Claiborne created was nothing short of a cult classic. This is why we're still talking about this at 23 years later, and we're not going to stop for a while. And, you know, I was honored to be a small part of it, but it worked out for everybody, and it influenced on a whole generation, or maybe even 2 generations. Don't forget to subscribe and like. It helps out with my algorithm. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you next time.